depression. It feels like even your friends have turned against you.
The enrollment period, it was a disaster.
Your sister, Mary, who is married to a woman.
Listen, I love Mary very much. I love her family very much. This is just an issue on which we disagree.
I'm very disappointed.
Did you vote for Obama?
Yes.
And are you disappointed in how it's...
Yes.
The president called a press conference to make a slight adjustment to the promise of a fully functional website by November 30th. Let me be clear. When I said end of November, I did not say which November.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. Muscular Christianity, where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to this second hour, of Focal Point on AFR Talk. I am Brian Fisher. You are listening to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. Number to call, 888-589-8840. Dan in Richmond and David in Jacksonville. Hang on, I'm going to get to you in just a quick second. I want to close the loop on what I had said earlier. First of all, about the illegality of what President Obama did when he issued his fix last Thursday, looking at a piece by Andy McCarthy on National Review Online. And here is what John Adams, he was a founding father, John Adams said when he wrote the 1780 Massachusetts Constitution. So it's about the same time. Federal Constitution 1787, Bill of Rights 1789. Here's the Massachusetts Constitution. And John Adams, one of the framers of the Constitution, very influential. Now, here's what he said, and this was the mindset now of the founders. This was their political framework, and exactly the same framework that was built into the Massachusetts Constitution is what went into the federal Constitution. Here is what John Adams said in 1780. Well, it's not just John Adams, because it was adopted by the Massachusetts legislature. Listen to this. You can't get any clearer. You can't get any stronger than this. The legislative department shall never exercise the executive and judicial powers or either of them. The executive shall never exercise the legislative and judicial powers or either of them. The judicial shall never exercise the legislative and executive powers or either of them, to the end it may be a government of laws and not of men. In other words, what Adams is saying, if you want a government of laws and not of men, not something that's arbitrary, not something that's capricious, not something that changes from one day to the next, you must have separation of powers in the branches of government. They must be equal branches of government, but they must be completely separate. They must be completely distinct, and their powers of operations must be completely separate from each other, and one must not try to exercise the powers that belong to one of the other branches, because then it becomes arbitrary and capricious. And Adams was very clear. The executive branch, that's what President Obama does in our form of government, shall never exercise legislative powers. So it is never permissible, ever, under our system of government, for a president to legislate from the Oval Office. That's unconstitutional. That's flatly wrong. This is exactly what President Obama has been trying to do with Obamacare. So there would be nothing illegal about it, even if these health insurance companies could make these changes and go back and let people keep these policies now. And there's, practically speaking, there's no way for them to do it. Those policies are gone. They've been canceled. There isn't any way. And realize this, and this is another point that Andy McCarthy made. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that because Obama said they could do it, they did reissue some of these old policies. Realize, ladies and gentlemen, as of January 1, those policies would be illegal. They would be in violation of the law. There is no way an insurance company in its right mind is going to issue an insurance policy that is contrary to federal law just because somebody told them it was okay. They're not going to do it. I mean, that is a path to suicide. It's insanity to do that. It would be folly for a citizen to buy one of these policies, because if he buys something that is clearly illegal, how is he going to go to court and try to enforce that when the product was illegal to begin with? So it's just a complete non-starter. And then one last thing before we go to the phones. I got some of the details from that piece by Andrew Stiles about the deceptive advertising. There's an entire section of the FTC code on deceptive advertising, Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act. And this is what Stiles says is violated by Obamacare. That act prohibits, quote, unfair or deceptive acts or practice in or affecting commerce. This includes a representation, omission, or practice that is likely to mislead the consumer, such that the consumer would be likely to have chosen differently but for the deception. So the fact that if you like your plan, you can keep it, that's outright fraud. It's deceptive advertising. If you did that in private industry, you would be headed to prison right now. That's how egregious these violations are. There are other ones here. The pricing feature on healthcare.gov is misleading. You can't get an accurate quote, an accurate estimate from healthcare.gov about what your healthcare costs are going to be. There are the serious risks to confidential and private business information. That's been compromised. Everybody knows that, but we were promised that personal information was going to be secure. It's not. If you endanger consumers by failing to maintain security for sensitive consumer information, the FTC has prosecuted 32 cases like that just since May of 2011. So they take that very, very seriously, and there's more to it. But President Obama, obviously in violation of all of these things, ought to be on his way to prison. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to David, Jacksonville, Florida. David. David in Jacksonville, Florida. Welcome. What's on your mind?
Oh, just three little things that I want to comment on, basically around what you've been talking about so far.
Yes, sir.
Well, the first thing I want to talk about was I hear all these stories from representatives and different Democrats and different people talk about the smaller states. Well, not smaller states, smaller per capita. They talk about Colorado lost 100,000 people on insurance and Wyoming lost 90,000. Well, why don't they report the real numbers from the larger states? Like I live in Florida, and we lost over 800,000 insured, and that's just from one company.
Yeah.
That doesn't count the others. That's just one company.
Yeah.
And a couple other things I want to talk about is you made a comment about the cost of Obamacare. Well, I've seen a comment somebody made, which made a lot of sense. It says there are 317 million people or more in the United States, and it costs a little over 320 to roll out Obamacare.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they'd have just given everybody $1 million in an insurance subsidiary plan, they'd have had insurance for the rest of their life and saved us a whole bunch of money.
Well, you know, and you think about it, David, the number of uninsured that we had, I forget what the exact total is, but, we had about 15% of the American people were not insured when they rolled out Obamacare. So let's figure what would 15% be. That would maybe be 20 million people or 30 million people, something like that. And I don't know what it would cost, and I'm not going to try to do math on the fly because I get in trouble every time I do it. But you think you had, and 80 to 90% of the American people were happy with the insurance they had. So the problem was trying to deal with this 15% of the American people that did not have insurance. It would have been way, way cheaper just to go out and buy them all an insurance policy. And I wouldn't be in favor of that because I think people need to provide for their own needs with the work of their own hands, and that's what families are for if they run short. But you realize, David, just how much less expensive it would have been if we just gone out and bought them a catastrophic health care plan. A low premium, high deductible, catastrophic. They're covered in case of, President Obama kept warning us about all of these one illness away from bankruptcy. Buy them all a catastrophic policy. Would have been cost a fraction of what we spent. Everybody would be happy. Focal Point AF for Talk back in 2.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today.